Have you ever looked at your paycheck and wondered, how can anyone build a better life with this? You work hard. You wake up before sunrise. You spend hours in traffic or commuting. You give your best every single day. At the end of the month, your salary finally arrives. For a brief moment, you feel relieved. You tell yourself, this month will be different. But within a few days, the rent is paid. The bills are gone. The groceries are bought. A few unexpected expenses appear. Then, almost as if someone pressed a reset button, you're back where you started, waiting, counting days until the next paycheck, living 1 month at a time. If this sounds familiar, let me tell you something that may surprise you. The greatest obstacle to becoming wealthy is not always a small salary. Sometimes, it's the invisible prison that comes with it. Today, I want to tell you the story of someone who spent years believing that he was poor because of the amount printed on his paycheck. But he eventually discovered something that completely changed his life. And perhaps it might change yours too. Meet Daniel. His name was Daniel Carter. He wasn't a genius. He didn't inherit wealth. He didn't win the lottery. He didn't come from a rich family. Daniel was simply an ordinary young man with ordinary dreams. Like millions of people around the world, he believed that if he worked hard enough, life would eventually reward him. When he landed his first full-time job, he was overjoyed. The salary wasn't impressive, but it was enough to make him feel that his future had finally begun. He imagined buying a beautiful home someday, traveling, helping his parents, starting a family, living comfortably. Everything seemed possible until reality arrived. The first paycheck disappeared almost instantly. So that's adulthood, he laughed. The second paycheck disappeared too. Then the third. Months turned into years. Yet nothing seemed to change. Daniel wasn't lazy. Far from it. He was one of the hardest working employees in the company. His manager trusted him. His colleagues admired him. Customers appreciated him. But every month, his bank account told a completely different story. The invisible cycle. Every month followed exactly the same pattern. Salary comes in. Bills go out. An unexpected expense appears. A birthday, a wedding, a repair, medicine, school expenses, transport, electricity, food. The money disappeared faster than it arrived. He kept telling himself, if only my salary were twice as much. But something strange caught his attention. There were colleagues earning almost exactly what he earned. Yet somehow, they seemed calmer. They weren't rich, but they never looked desperate. They weren't constantly borrowing money. They weren't panicking every month. Daniel couldn't understand it. How could people earning nearly the same income live such different lives? At first, he assumed they had wealthy families. Maybe they had hidden businesses. Maybe someone was secretly supporting them. He had an answer for everything, except the truth. One afternoon, while eating lunch alone, Daniel looked around the cafeteria. Some people complained about taxes. Others blamed inflation. Some blamed politicians. Others blamed their employers. It suddenly occurred to him. Almost everyone believed the same thing. My life will begin when I earn more. That sentence sounded harmless, but over time, it becomes a prison. Because if your happiness depends entirely on a future salary, you're postponing your life. Don't misunderstand me. Higher income helps. Of course it does. But history has shown us something fascinating. Some people earn enormous salaries, yet retire with nothing. Others begin with almost nothing, yet build lasting wealth. So, perhaps, the salary itself isn't the whole story. Perhaps something else is quietly shaping every financial future. One rainy evening, Daniel stayed late at work to finish a report. Most employees had already left. As he packed his bag, he noticed an elderly maintenance worker quietly cleaning the office. His name was Samuel. Everyone liked Samuel. He was always smiling, always calm, always encouraging others. Daniel had known him for years, but that evening, something caught his attention. Samuel received a phone call. He smiled. Then he said, "Tell them I'll approve the payment tomorrow." Daniel was confused. Approve what payment? Curiosity got the better of him. "Samuel, can I ask you something?" "Of course. I've heard you talking about approving payments before. What exactly do you do?" Samuel smiled. "I own a few rental apartments." Daniel laughed. "You?" Samuel nodded. "And a small warehouse." Daniel stopped smiling. "And I own part of a transport business." Daniel stared at him. His mind couldn't process what he had just heard. This man, the same man pushing a cleaning cart every evening, owned rental properties? Owned businesses? It didn't make sense. If he was wealthy, why was he still working here? Samuel looked at Daniel and smiled. "I was wondering how long it would take before you asked." Daniel couldn't hold back anymore. "Samuel, if you own businesses, why are you still here?" Samuel laughed softly. "Because I choose to be." Daniel was speechless. Then Samuel asked a question that Daniel would never forget. "Daniel, do you know the difference between people who stay poor and people who eventually become wealthy?" Daniel answered immediately. "Money." Samuel smiled. "No." "Education?" "No." "Luck?" Samuel shook his head once again. Then he leaned slightly closer. "The biggest difference is what they do with the little they already have." Daniel frowned. Samuel continued. "Most people think wealth begins when income increases. It rarely does. Wealth usually begins when thinking changes." Daniel remained silent. Samuel wasn't finished. "If I gave you 10 times your salary today, would you become wealthy? Or would you simply become an expensive version of your current self?" The question hit Daniel like a bolt of lightning. He wanted to answer, but he couldn't, because deep inside, he already knew the truth. If his income doubled tomorrow, his lifestyle would probably double too. His problems would simply become more expensive. For the first time in years, Daniel wasn't thinking about his salary. He was thinking about himself. And that was the beginning of a journey he never expected to take. But what Samuel revealed over the following weeks challenged everything Daniel believed about money, success, and freedom. Those lessons were simple, yet they were powerful enough to transform not only Daniel's finances, but his entire life. And they may just transform yours as well. For the next several days, Samuel's question refused to leave Daniel's mind. "If I gave you 10 times your salary today, would you become wealthy? Or would you simply become an expensive version of your current self?" Daniel replayed those words again and again. They haunted him, at work, while commuting, even as he lay awake at night staring at the ceiling. The more he thought about them, the more uncomfortable he became. He realized something painful. For years, He had blamed everything except the one thing he had complete control over: his own financial habits. It wasn't easy to admit, but growth rarely begins with comfort. It begins with honesty. The following weekend, Samuel handed Daniel a small notebook. "Write down every single dollar you spend," he said. Daniel smiled politely. "That's too simple." Samuel smiled back. "Exactly. Most people ignore simple things because they are looking for complicated answers." Daniel decided to try. The first day seemed ordinary. A cup of coffee, a snack, a taxi instead of walking, a streaming subscription he barely used, an online purchase he had forgotten about. By the end of the week, he was shocked. None of the expenses seemed large on their own, but together they were quietly stealing his future. Samuel looked at the notebook and said, "Money doesn't usually disappear because of one big mistake. It disappears because of hundreds of small decisions we stop noticing." Daniel had never looked at money that way before. A few days later, Daniel walked past a store and saw the newest smartphone on display. His old habit whispered, "You deserve it." After all, he had worked hard. He almost walked in. Then Samuel's voice echoed in his mind, "Never confuse what is expensive with what is valuable." Daniel stopped. He asked himself a question he had never asked before. Will this purchase make my future better, or only make today more exciting? For the first time in years, he walked away. That evening he didn't feel deprived. He felt stronger. Because every time we say yes to one thing, we automatically say no to something else. Buying unnecessary luxuries today often means saying no to opportunities tomorrow. One evening, Samuel asked, "What do you normally do after work?" Daniel shrugged. "I watch videos, scroll through social media, and rest." Samuel nodded. "Nothing wrong with resting. But tell me something. If your job pays for 8 hours a day, what are the other hours of your day building?" Daniel had never thought about that. Samuel continued, "The wealthiest people I know don't only work for money. They spend time building skills that money will eventually reward." Those words changed Daniel's evenings. Instead of spending every night consuming entertainment, he began learning public speaking, sales, digital marketing, basic investing, negotiation, communication. Some nights he was exhausted. Some lessons were difficult. Some days he wondered if it was worth it. But little by little, he was becoming more valuable than he had been yesterday. 6 months later, Daniel felt confident enough to start a small online business. He invested nearly all the money he had saved. He was excited. He imagined customers pouring in. Instead, almost nothing happened. The business failed. He lost most of his savings. He was devastated. He wanted to quit. One evening, he sat with Samuel in silence. "I knew this wouldn't work," Daniel sighed. Samuel smiled. "No, you knew it might not work. Those are two very different things." Daniel looked down. Samuel continued, "Failure is expensive, but ignorance costs even more. If this experience taught you lessons that save you from bigger mistakes later, then you didn't lose everything. You paid tuition." Daniel laughed. "That was an expensive school." Samuel laughed too. "So is every university. The difference is that one gives you a certificate. The other gives you experience." Months passed. Daniel kept learning. He kept saving. He kept improving. He started another small project. This time, he moved slowly. He researched. He planned. He listened more than he spoke. He focused on solving real problems instead of chasing quick money. Something unexpected happened. People began recommending his services. Customers returned. Income slowly increased. Not dramatically, gradually, and that made all the difference. Because lasting wealth is usually built quietly, not loudly. One afternoon, Daniel received exciting news. He had been promoted. His salary increased. Years earlier, he would have celebrated by upgrading everything. A bigger apartment, a newer car, more expansive clothes, a more luxurious lifestyle. But Samuel stopped him with one sentence. The fastest way to stay poor is to let every pay raise become a spending raise. Daniel smiled. This time, he did something different. He increased his investments before increasing his lifestyle. He made his money work before asking it to entertain him. That single decision changed the direction of his future. One evening, Samuel drew 3 circles on a piece of paper. Every dollar you earn should know exactly where it's going. He pointed to the first circle. This one pays for your life, food, housing, transport, utilities. The second circle. This one builds your future. Savings, investments, learning, skills, businesses. The third circle. This one allows you to enjoy your life responsibly. Travel, hobbies, entertainment, celebrations. Samuel smiled. Most people reverse the order. They spend first, save what is left, and wonder why nothing is left. Daniel finally understood. Money wasn't just something to spend. It was something to direct. Like water, if you don't control where it flows, it will always find a way to disappear. Nearly 2 years had passed since that rainy evening. Daniel's salary had grown, but something else had grown much faster. His confidence, his discipline, his knowledge, his ability to create value. For the first time in his life, he wasn't depending entirely on one paycheck. He had built additional streams of income. Small at first, but growing steadily. Then one evening Samuel asked another unforgettable question. Daniel, what if you lost your job tomorrow? Daniel paused. Then he smiled. I'd be disappointed, but I wouldn't be destroyed. Samuel nodded proudly. Exactly. The goal was never to escape work. The goal was to escape dependence. And that realization marked the beginning of a completely different life. But Daniel was about to discover that building wealth wasn't the greatest reward. The greatest reward was becoming the kind of person capable of creating it again and again. And that lesson would change everything. 5 years had passed. If you had met Daniel on the street, you might not have noticed anything extraordinary about him. He still greeted people with the same warm smile. He still treated everyone with respect. He still lived below his means. But behind that ordinary appearance, an extraordinary transformation had taken place. His salary was no longer his lifeline. His investments had grown steadily. His small side business had expanded beyond anything he had imagined. The skills he had spent years learning had become more valuable than the job he once depended on. For the first time in his adult life, money was no longer a source of fear. It had become a tool, and that changed everything. One afternoon, Daniel received a message from an old friend named Michael. "Can we meet?" When they sat down together, Michael looked exhausted. "I don't understand it," he admitted. "I'm earning almost 3 times what I earned 5 years ago. But I still have nothing left at the end of every month. Daniel remained quiet. Michael continued, I thought earning more would solve everything. Daniel smiled gently. So did I. Then he pulled a napkin toward him and drew 2 simple circles. In the first circle, he wrote, income. In the second circle, he wrote, habits. He looked at Michael and said, most people spend their lives trying to enlarge the first circle, but very few spend time improving the second. And yet, the second circle determines what happens to the first. Michael stared at the drawing. For the first time, he understood that a larger income without better habits is like pouring water into a leaking bucket. You can keep adding more, but you'll never keep enough. There is something most people never see. Real wealth is usually quiet. It doesn't always announce itself with luxury cars. It doesn't need expensive watches to prove its existence. It doesn't shout. It grows, quietly, patiently, almost invisibly. While the world is busy chasing appearances, wealthy people are often building foundations. They buy assets before applause. They invest before they celebrate. They think in years, while others think only about the weekend. That is why true wealth often looks boring in the beginning, but extraordinary in the end. One rainy evening, Daniel found himself standing outside the very building where his journey had begun. He walked through the entrance. The hallway looked the same. Even the old clock on the wall was still ticking. He smiled. How different his life had become. He wasn't there because he needed the job. He was there because he wanted to see the man who had changed his life. Samuel. Daniel found him exactly where he expected, calmly working, just as he had years before. Samuel smiled the moment he saw him. I knew you'd come back one day. Daniel laughed. And I knew you'd still be working. Samuel smiled. I told you before. I work because I choose to, not because I have to. There is a difference. Daniel nodded. For years, he had misunderstood freedom. He thought freedom meant never working again. Now he understood. Freedom means having choices. The choice to work, the choice to rest, the choice to help others, the choice to spend time with family, the choice to say no to opportunities that don't align with your values. Money had not purchased Daniel's happiness. It had purchased his options. Before Daniel left, Samuel handed him one final piece of paper. On it were 7 short sentences. Daniel kept them for the rest of his life. They read, first, your salary is important, but your habits are more important. Second, spend less time trying to look wealthy and more time becoming wealthy. Third, the greatest investment you will ever make is in yourself. No one can steal your knowledge. No recession can erase your skills. And every new skill increases your ability to create value. Fourth, don't wait for perfect conditions. The perfect time almost never arrives. Start with what you have. Start where you are, and improve as you go. Fifth, never allow comfort to become your prison. Growth usually begins where comfort ends. Sixth, own things that pay you. Instead of filling your life with things that demand more from you, assets put money into your pocket. Liabilities quietly take it out. Know the difference. Seventh, never measure wealth only by the size of your bank account. Measure it by your peace of mind, your freedom, your relationships, your integrity, and your ability to help others. Because if money makes you richer, but costs you your character, you have paid far too high a price. Perhaps you're watching this today while worrying about your next rent payment. Perhaps you're wondering how you'll pay your bills. Perhaps you're working harder than ever and still feel as though you're standing still. If that's you, I want you to remember something. You are not behind because your journey looks different from someone else's. Many of the people you admire started with very little. What separated them wasn't that life was easier. It was that they refused to let today's circumstances become tomorrow's identity. You may not be able to change your salary overnight, but you can change your habits today. You can learn one new skill. You can save a little. You can read one chapter. You can spend 1 hour building your future instead of escaping from it. Small actions seem insignificant when viewed alone, but repeated consistently, they become unstoppable. Never underestimate the power of ordinary decisions made every single day. Before we end, let me leave you with one thought. Many people spend their entire lives waiting for someone else to change their future, waiting for a better boss, waiting for a better government, waiting for a better economy, waiting for the perfect opportunity. But the people who eventually transform their lives usually make one simple decision. They stop waiting, and they start building. Not because they have more money, not because they have more talent, but because they understand something that others don't. Wealth is rarely built by one big moment. It is built by thousands of small decisions made when no one is watching. So, if your salary is small today, don't let it convince you that your future must also be small. Your paycheck may describe your current situation. It does not define your destiny. One wise decision, one new skill, one disciplined habit, one investment, one opportunity, repeated over months and years, can completely rewrite the story of your life. The question is not whether you can become wealthy. The real question is, what decision will you make today that your future self will thank you for? Because every great financial journey begins the same way. Not with a fortune, not with a miracle, but with a single decision to stop surviving and start building. Thank you for watching. If this story encouraged you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who feels trapped by a small salary. Sometimes, the greatest gift you can give another person is not money, but a new way of thinking. And remember, your income can change your lifestyle, but your mindset, your character, and your daily habits can change your life. I'll see you in the next video.